All right, let me take a moment. My name is Walter Hayes. I'm 81 years old. I live in Baltimore, in the same neighborhood I've lived in most of my life. I worked the docks here for years, and later I worked nights as a security guard. I'm not saying this because it's impressive. I'm saying it because that routine shaped how I understood marriage, work, and silence. I'm sitting here talking to a camera because there's something I believed for a long time that turned out to be wrong, and I didn't realize it was wrong until it was too late to fix it. For years I thought I had a broken marriage. Not a dramatic one, not the kind people whisper about. No shouting matches, no cheating, no slammed doors. From the outside, it probably looked fine. Stable, long, successful even. Inside, it felt tired, quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. Conversations became shorter. Eye contact became optional. We knew each other well enough to stop explaining ourselves, and that felt like progress at the time. I told myself this was normal. 50 years together is supposed to look like this, right? Less talking, less curiosity, less urgency. I thought the absence of conflict meant we were doing something right. I didn't realize we were also doing something else. We were slowly withdrawing. Eleanor noticed before I did. She didn't accuse. She didn't demand. She would say things like, "We don't talk the way we used to," or, "Sometimes it feels like we live next to each other instead of with each other." I heard those words. I just didn't take them seriously. I told myself she was tired, or bored, or going through a phase. I told myself marriage wasn't supposed to feel exciting forever. I told myself stability mattered more than closeness. What I was really telling myself was that I didn't want to put the effort back in. I thought the marriage was broken because it didn't feel the way it used to. I didn't consider that maybe it felt different because I had stopped showing up fully. Work was always a good excuse. I was tired. My back hurt. My head was full. I had earned rest. That's how I framed it. Every night, I would come home and shrink into myself, convinced that being physically present was enough. Eleanor would try to talk. Sometimes about nothing important. Sometimes about things that clearly mattered to her. I listened just enough to respond, just enough to appear engaged. Then I would retreat into silence. I told myself that silence meant comfort, that after decades together, words weren't necessary anymore, that real intimacy didn't need explanation. That's a convenient belief when you're the one withdrawing. Over time, the distance became normal. So normal that I stopped noticing it. We shared space. We shared routines. We shared history. But we stopped sharing curiosity. I didn't ask how she was really doing. I didn't ask what she was thinking lately. I assumed I already knew. Assumption is a quiet killer in long marriages. I remember thinking more than once that something felt off, that the house felt heavier than it used to, that Eleanor seemed quieter, more careful with her words. I noticed it, and then I ignored it. I told myself every long marriage goes through dry periods. I told myself this was just one of them. I told myself we'd talk about it later, when things slowed down. Later felt endless back then. Then Eleanor got sick. At first it didn't change much. Doctor visits, schedules, adjustments. We slipped into problem-solving mode. That was familiar territory for me. Fixing things felt easier than talking about feelings. But something shifted. Conversations became more fragile. Moments felt heavier. There were things she wanted to say that took longer to come out. And I wish I could tell you I leaned in. I didn't. Not enough. I still believed we had time. Time to reconnect. Time to talk properly. Time to fix what I thought was broken. I didn't realize that what I thought was a broken marriage wasn't broken at all. It was neglected, And neglect doesn't announce itself. It just waits. By the time I understood the difference, I was sitting alone in a quiet apartment, replaying years I thought were stable, and realizing how much I had misunderstood. I didn't lose my wife because the marriage failed. I lost her having never fully repaired something that wasn't beyond saving. That realization came too late to change the past, but not too late to understand it. In the second part, I'm going to tell you what I finally saw after she was gone. The moments I replay, the assumptions I regret, and the difference between a marriage that's broken and one that's simply being starved of attention. After Eleanor died, the house didn't feel empty right away. At first, it felt paused, like someone had stepped out of the room and would be back any second. I still caught myself listening for her footsteps, the way she moved around the kitchen. The small sounds you stop noticing when they're always there. Then one morning I realized I hadn't heard those sounds in days. That's when the silence changed. It wasn't waiting anymore. It had settled. That's when I started replaying things. Not arguments, not big dramatic moments, the ordinary ones, the evenings where we sat in the same room and said almost nothing. The times she started a sentence and I let it trail off because I was tired. The moments where I chose comfort over curiosity. I used to think a broken marriage would feel loud, angry, chaotic. I didn't understand that some marriages don't break. They slowly starve. I thought because we didn't fight, we were okay. I thought because we stayed together, we were solid. I thought because we shared history, the present didn't need as much attention. That was the mistake. Love doesn't disappear all at once. It thins out when you stop feeding it. And I had been on a diet of excuses for years. After she was gone, I noticed how many things I didn't know about her final years. Not because she hid them, but because I stopped asking. I knew her routines. I knew her preferences. But I didn't always know her inner life anymore. That's a hard thing to admit about someone you were married to for over 50 years. There were questions I never asked because I assumed the answers wouldn't change anything. How she was really feeling about getting older, what scared her at night, whether she felt seen by me anymore. I assumed love meant familiarity. I didn't realize love also requires attention, even late in life, especially late in life. One of the most painful realizations came when I understood that Eleanor had been adapting to my absence long before she died. She learned how to be quieter, how to ask for less, how to protect herself from disappointment. That didn't happen overnight. That happened because I taught her slowly that reaching for me often led nowhere. I don't say that to punish myself. I say it because it's the truth. And the truth doesn't care whether it hurts your pride. I remember moments where she would look at me a little longer than usual, like she was deciding whether to say something. I used to miss that, or notice it and ignore it. Now I see it clearly, too clearly. I thought the marriage was broken because it didn't feel warm anymore. What I didn't understand was that warmth doesn't maintain itself. It needs participation. I also misunderstood silence. I told myself silence meant comfort, trust, ease. Sometimes it does. But silence can also mean resignation. It can mean someone has stopped believing it's worth speaking. I never asked Eleanor which kind of silence ours had become. That's one of the questions I can't ask now. Grief doesn't always come from losing a person. Sometimes it comes from finally seeing the full picture of a relationship when it's already over. You don't just miss who they were. You miss who you could have been together if you had paid attention sooner. That kind of grief is quiet and relentless. I spent a long time blaming myself in unproductive ways, replaying scenes, rewriting conversations in my head. None of that helped. What eventually helped was understanding the pattern, not the moments. The pattern was simple. I believed stability was enough. I believed longevity guaranteed closeness. I believed effort could be reduced once something was established. Marriage doesn't work like that. It doesn't coast. It either grows or shrinks. There's no neutral. I also learned that regret isn't always loud or dramatic. Most days it shows up as a small thought you can't finish, a sentence that ends too early, a realization that arrives just as you're about to sleep. I still have days where I think, if I had just slowed down sooner, or if I had taken those comments seriously, or if I had treated connection like something fragile instead of something guaranteed. Those thoughts don't ruin my days anymore, but they're there. They probably always will be. If you're listening to this and thinking about your own marriage, I'm not telling you it's broken. I'm telling you to be careful with the assumption that time alone will hold it together. Time doesn't fix neglect. It just makes it quieter. You don't need a dramatic intervention. You don't need a perfect speech. Sometimes all that's required is attention, real attention. The kind where you ask a question and stay long enough to hear the answer. I thought my marriage was broken because it didn't look the way it used to. I didn't understand that what was missing wasn't love. It was presence. I still regret not learning that sooner. Not because Eleanor and I didn't have good years. We did, many of them. But because the later years could have been gentler, warmer, more honest if I hadn't mistaken comfort for connection. That's the part that stays with me. I'm not sharing this because I have advice for everyone. I'm sharing it because misunderstanding something for a long time doesn't stop being a mistake just because the years pass. Some lessons only become clear when there's no one left to practice them with. That doesn't mean they're meaningless. It means they're expensive. I thought I had a broken marriage. What I really had was a marriage that needed more of me than I was giving, and I understood that only after it was over.